In the small town of Oakville, life had always been picture perfect. White picket fences, children playing in the streets, and neighbors greeting each other with warm smiles painted an idyllic image. However, beneath this veil of normalcy lurked a darkness that few would ever suspect. Claire Thompson was known in the community as a devoted mother and a loving wife. She was often seen volunteering at the local school and participating in church activities. Her husband, David, was a kind and patient man, working as a middle school teacher. Together, they had 3 beautiful children: 12-year-old Emily, 9-year-old Ethan, and 6-year-old Sophie. The Thompsons were, at least on the surface, the quintessential American family. Yet, behind Claire's warm smile and nurturing demeanor lay a mind tormented by darkness. A history of untreated mental illness characterized her life, a chaotic blend of anxiety and depression that ebbed and flowed like the tide. Despite numerous visits to therapists and endless prescriptions of psychiatric medications, Claire struggled to find balance. Her mental state grew worse, amplified by the stress of motherhood and societal expectations of perfection. As time passed, the whispers behind closed doors began. Neighbors noted the increasingly disheveled state of the Thompson home, once filled with laughter and light. David, though supportive, seemed oblivious to the full extent of Claire's struggles. He was busy with work, and the couple had not shared an intimate moment in years. The passion that once defined their connection had dwindled into distant memories. Claire tried to cope, throwing herself into her children's lives. She made elaborate plans for birthday parties, helped with school projects, and tirelessly organized family outings, all the while battling her inner demons. On the surface, things appeared normal. Her children were thriving, and their school records reflected engaged and happy students. But inside, Claire felt like she was losing the battle. The weight of the world pressed upon her, and the shadow of a crushing despair tightened its grip. October of that year arrived with a crispness in the air. The trees began displaying the brilliant colors of fall, yet for Claire, each vibrant leaf was a reminder of her waning spirit. The holiday season loomed ahead, a time typically filled with joy, but for her, it symbolized impending failure. Every day felt like a mountain to climb, and she was exhausted. One particularly bleak evening, after a grueling day that left her feeling empty, Claire sat in her dimly lit living room, surrounded by the chaos of scattered toys and unwashed dishes. Her children were upstairs, their laughter ringing through the house like a haunting melody. It was a sound she should have cherished, but instead, it grated on her like nails on a chalkboard. A sense of rage began to stir within her, entangled with despair. In a fit of panic and confusion, Claire spiraled deeper into her mental labyrinth. The love she felt for her children twisted and warped in her mind. She believed that she was the cause of their unhappiness, that her inability to provide a perfect home was a crime against their innocence. Her thoughts became dark, convincing her that freeing her children from the torment of her madness was an act of love. The sounds of joy became a cacophony of guilt. That fateful night, as the clock struck midnight and the house lay still, Claire descended into the depths of her fractured psyche. She crept into each of her children's rooms, her heart racing with anguish and love, mingling with the poison of her thoughts. Emily, her eldest, innocent and full of dreams; Ethan, her playful boy; and little Sophie, who still believed in fairy tales. In her deranged state, Claire thought she was saving them from a future of pain, the pain she believed she would inflict upon them if she were to stay in their lives. With trembling hands, Claire made choices that would rip apart the fabric of their lives forever. The following morning, Oakville awoke to an unimaginable tragedy. The Thompsons were gone, and the town was plunged into confusion and grief. Rumors spread like wildfire, and whispers filled the air. How could this have happened? As authorities conducted their investigation, Claire was found in a state of complete dissociation. The nightmares that had plagued her mind had materialized into a waking reality, a reality where she believed she was liberating her family from the torment of existence. She was taken into custody, dazed and confused, her once vibrant spirit extinguished, leaving only a shadow of the woman she used to be. In the days that followed, a profound sense of loss hung over Oakville. The Thompsons had been beloved, and the void their absence left was palpable. Candles were lit, flowers were laid, and the community mourned the lives that were so tragically cut short. In the courtroom, as Claire faced the charges against her, the community struggled to grapple with the question that hung heavy in the air. How could a mother so loving, so devoted, do something so unspeakable? The trial became a media sensation, with psychologists and experts dissecting Claire's mental state like vultures on carrion. Testimonies from neighbors painted a picture of a woman fighting a silent battle, yet there were no tangible signs that could have warned them of the terrible tragedy that lay ahead. The intricacies of her mind, complex, chaotic, and tortured, were laid bare before the world, and as the verdict was announced, the courtroom fell silent. Claire was found guilty of manslaughter, but her sentence was one of anguish rather than prison bars. She was sent to a psychiatric facility, where she would continue her battle against the demons she had faced for so long. Her once bright eyes now seemed empty as she stared into the abyss, grappling with the irreversible choices she made in her moment of insanity. As for the town of Oakville, it struggled to heal. The memory of the Thompson family slowly faded into the annals of history. Their story became a cautionary tale of the complexities of mental health, a reminder that not every battle is fought visibly and that love, twisted by darkness, can lead to unspeakable tragedy. In time, the town rebuilt itself, yet the shadows of Claire's mind lingered, haunting the streets where laughter once reigned. A solemn echo of a family that was lost, a reminder of the unseen battles many fight alone. In the quaint suburban town of Maplewood, where white picket fences framed every yard, and the scent of blooming flowers wafted through the air, Lydia Carlson led what appeared to be a perfect life. She was known for her infectious laughter and warm smile, but beneath the surface, a storm brewed. Her husband, Mark Carlson, an ostensibly devoted spouse and father, had slowly begun to change. Long hours at work, late-night phone calls, and unexplained absences became part of their routine. Lydia had always prided herself on being an attentive wife. She managed their home, cared for their 2 children, and even took the time to volunteer at the local community center. But as weeks turned into months, she started noticing the subtle shifts in Mark's demeanor, his disinterest in family activities, and his increasingly secretive nature. She felt a pang of worry but brushed it aside, convincing herself that he was simply under stress from work. One evening, while preparing dinner, Lydia received a peculiar phone call from an unfamiliar number. Assuming it was a wrong number, she almost hung up. But something made her pause. A woman's voice on the other end said, "Is this Lydia? I need to talk to you about Mark." The air in the room became heavy as the words registered. Lydia felt her heart race. "What do you mean? Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "My name is Jessica. I've been seeing Mark for the past 6 months. He told me he was single." Lydia's hands dropped the wooden spoon she was using, causing it to hit the floor with a loud clatter. The chef's knife, still on the cutting board, seemed to reflect the darkness threatening to engulf her world. Anger intertwined with a sense of betrayal surged through her veins. After an agonizing conversation that lasted nearly an hour, Lydia learned more about Jessica, a young, vibrant woman who seemed to embody everything Mark had once claimed to admire in Lydia. As Jessica recounted tales of romantic weekends and stolen moments, Lydia's heart shattered into a million pieces. In the weeks that followed, Lydia's life transformed into a world of pain and obsession. She began to observe Mark's every move, trailing him discreetly when she could. She watched him share intimate laughs with friends whom she never recognized and stayed at odd hours at work. With every encounter, her once seemingly harmonious life twisted into a nightmarish reality. Her vengeance grew as the reality of Mark's double life became more apparent. She became fixated on revenge, crawling deeper into the dark recesses of her mind, pondering the many ways to confront the man who shattered her life. How could he betray her so callously? That's when Lydia started to plot his downfall. A part of her longed for confrontation, to unleash her fury, to scream, to cry, to let him feel a fraction of the agony she endured. But another part, darker and more sinister, craved blood. As each day melded into the next, her anger morphed into a chilling resolve. One night, after a particularly long day of pretending nothing was wrong, Lydia returned home to find Mark sitting at the kitchen table, his laptop open and a mischievous smirk on his face. She feigned a smile and asked him about his day, praying for normalcy. "I'm going to need to work late tomorrow," he said, oblivious to the turmoil swirling in her chest. "Of course," she replied, forcing cheerfulness through gritted teeth. "I'll make you your favorite dinner." As he turned his attention back to the screen, Lydia's mind raced. The perfect plan began to form, a tragedy disguised as a crime of passion. She would make him pay dearly for all the love she had wasted on him. The following evening, with the house quiet and the children asleep, Lydia confronted Mark. As he returned home late, she sat asserting control over the dinner table adorned with candles, an outpouring of love that now felt grotesque. When he stepped inside, the tension was palpable. "Lydia, what's all this?" he asked, bemused but delighted at the sight before him. "I think we need to talk, Mark," she replied, her tone steady and unsettling, like a calm before a storm. He took a seat, the ease fading from his expression as he sensed something had shifted. "Of course. What's on your mind?" With each word, Lydia's resolve reinforced. She unveiled the tapestry of lies he had woven, a narrative of infidelity and betrayal, laying bare the emotional toll it took on her. As she finished, his face transformed. The smug arrogance faded, replaced by nervousness and guilt. "Lydia, I can explain," he stammered, but the truth had already spilled from her lips. "Explain? You don't get to explain anymore. You chose your path, and now you will face the consequences." The heated exchange devolved into chaos as Mark, desperate to regain control, lunged across the table. In that moment, buried rage erupted like a volcano. With a shaking hand, Lydia reached for the knife that had gleamed innocently only moments earlier. In a desperate act of self-preservation and wrath, she stabbed him. Time slowed as Mark's eyes widened in shock, the betrayal evident in his gaze. As he slumped to the floor, life draining from his body, Lydia stood frozen, horrified yet strangely liberated. The realization of what she had done reverberated through her soul. She felt a complex blend of exhilaration and dread, unsure if she had finally freed herself from her prison or condemned herself to a darker one. The aftermath unfolded like a relentless storm. Lydia's world spiraled into chaos as the police arrived, breaking the calm of the suburban night. Faced with a twisted fate, she recounted the story, her soul screaming for justice yet fearing the consequences of her actions. In court, the tale of her triumph became a tragedy, a reflection of love turned sour. The whispers of betrayal echoed through the gallery as she received mixed sympathies. Some claimed she was a victim of circumstance, while others branded her a monster, forever stained by the crimson mark of her husband's blood. Lydia navigated the treacherous waters of guilt and remorse, reflecting on the life she led. Her transformation from devoted wife to a woman capable of murder was startling, and yet, as she looked back, a part of her felt that murder was an escape, a freedom from the shackles of betrayal. Years passed, and the empty house in Maplewood became a haunted shell of its former self, a monument to what might have been. Lydia served her sentence, the warden of her memories, wandering through a life marked by loss. In the prison of her own making, she bore the consequences of her actions, but she also carried the weight of her husband's deception. On reflection, she understood that both betrayal and vengeance come with a cost, one that reverberates endlessly within the heart. As she gazed out of her cell window, the gray clouds gathered, reminiscent of the storms that had ravished her once vibrant life. While the shadows of betrayal lurked eternally behind her, Lydia resolved to rise from the ashes of despair, embracing the painful truth that sometimes even love can become twisted into something irretrievably dark. In the quaint town of Maplewood, nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, life seemed idyllic. The sun always painted the sky a brilliant hue at dawn, and neighbors knew each other by name. In this picturesque setting lived Sarah and Tom Mitchell, a couple whose relationship appeared perfect to the outside world. They had been married for over a decade, sharing laughter, dreams, and the kind of love that many envied. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly flawless marriage, discontent simmered. Tom, a charismatic entrepreneur, had recently become distant, often working late hours and attending business meetings that seemed to stretch into the night. Sarah, a devoted wife and mother, found herself increasingly lonely. Their once vibrant conversations dwindled to mundane exchanges about groceries and household chores. As time elapsed, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in Tom's behavior. He'd received texts at odd hours, often excusing himself to step out for work calls. The scent of unfamiliar perfumes lingered on his clothing, and Sarah found herself lying awake at night, tormented by doubt. Her mind raced, imagining scenarios that twisted her heart. One evening, while tidying up their bedroom, Sarah accidentally stumbled upon an envelope tucked beneath Tom's stack of papers. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing hotel receipts and a heartfelt note addressed to someone named Jessica. The betrayal ripped through her like a jagged blade. Tom had been unfaithful, Confronting Tom was the hardest thing Sarah had ever done. She waited until he returned home that night, the tension suffocating the air between them. When he stepped through the door, she could see the fatigue etched on his face, unaware of the storm brewing inside her. "Tom," she began, her voice steady. "We need to talk." His expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing his features. As Sarah laid out the evidence, she watched as the color drained from his face. He stammered, fumbling for words, but the truth was undeniable. "Honey, it was just a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you," he pleaded, each word a dagger in her heart. But to Sarah, it was too late. The love she once had for him twisted into a dark haze of anger and betrayal. With every word he spoke, she felt herself slipping further away from the man she once adored. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere of their home transformed. Once filled with laughter, it felt cold and hostile. Sarah started to plot. The idea of revenge took root in her mind, wrapping around her thoughts until it dominated her every waking moment. Sarah immersed herself in meticulous planning. Her job as a veterinary technician provided her with a unique opportunity to access drugs that could induce a heart attack, all while making it appear like a natural occurrence. She spent hours concocting her strategy, how to execute the perfect crime without raising suspicion. Her chance came one fateful evening when Tom returned home, distracted by a phone call from Jessica. Sarah watched from a distance as he laughed, his carefree demeanor igniting a fire inside her. When he hung up, he entered the kitchen, oblivious to the storm brewing in Sarah's heart. "Tom, do you want some wine?" she asked sweetly, her voice masking the turmoil beneath. "Sure, sounds great," he replied, flashing his charming smile, the same smile she had once fallen for. As she poured the wine, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that tonight would be the night everything changed. After a romantic dinner, Sarah suggested they celebrate with a glass of wine. She discreetly added the lethal mixture to Tom's glass, her pulse racing with anticipation. They clinked their glasses, and the tension hung heavy in the air as they toasted to better days ahead. Little did Tom know, he was drinking his last toast. As the evening progressed, Tom began to show signs of discomfort. He winced and placed a hand on his chest, but Sarah feigned concern, all the while pushing her emotions deeper into a well of darkness. Moments later, he collapsed, and panic surged through Sarah. She rushed to him, dialed 911, and cried for help, her voice filled with feigned desperation. When the paramedics arrived, they found Tom unresponsive. In the chaotic aftermath, Sarah wept, her tears a facade for the darkness lurking within. As the ambulance doors closed, she stood outside, absorbed in her thoughts. All the pain, all the betrayal, had culminated in this moment, and the weight of her actions began to settle within her. The investigation that followed was thorough. In a small town like Maplewood, everyone knew each other, and rumors spread like wildfire. Sarah played the grieving widow, accepting condolences while hiding her dark secret. She attended the funeral, wearing a mask of sorrow, while deep down she felt a strange sense of relief. However, guilt began to weigh heavily on her conscience. Every shadow seemed to whisper Tom's name, and every creak in the house echoed with memories of their life together. No matter how hard she tried to bury the past, it clawed its way back, reminding her of the love she had extinguished. A month after Tom's death, the authorities announced that his case had heightened suspicion. They discovered that Sarah had the means to procure the drugs and questioned her multiple times. Sarah maintained her innocence, portraying herself as the victim of a fractured marriage. But the more she tried to distance herself from the past, the more the truth clawed its way back. One evening, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Detective Mills, a seasoned investigator who had become increasingly aware of Sarah's story. He sat across from her, scrutinizing her every move. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and steady, "we know Tom didn't die of natural causes. We're going to find the truth." Panic swelled within her, but she forced a smile. "I loved him. You have to believe me." Detective Mills studied her for what felt like hours, searching for cracks in her facade. He left her that night with a warning: he'd be watching her every step. Haunted by her actions, Sarah found it impossible to live a normal life. The weight of Tom's death smothered her, and she turned to alcohol for solace. Nights turned into a blur, and the darkness that enveloped her grew thicker. The anger and betrayal that had fueled her initial actions transformed into pain and regret. One night, after consuming too much wine, she stumbled upon Tom's old phone, which she had kept hidden away. She opened it and found photos of happier times, messages that tore at her heart. One message stood out: an apology from Tom, promising to make it right, a promise he would never fulfill. Overwhelmed, Sarah broke down, realizing the bitter truth. Her actions had led her down a path of no return. Shrouded in despair, she decided to confess. Perhaps in revealing the truth, she could find some semblance of peace. Sarah walked into the precinct the next day, her hands trembling as she approached Detective Mills. "I need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. Mills looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "What's changed?" I did it," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I killed Tom. I thought it would bring me peace, but it only brought me pain." The confession fell from her lips like ash, and for the first time since that fateful night, Sarah felt a flicker of relief. The weight of her secret was lifted, but it came at a cost. The trial that followed captivated the town of Maplewood. Friends, neighbors, and family members filled the courtroom, their faces a mix of disbelief, anger, and sorrow. Sarah stood before the judge, racked with guilt, her heart heavy. As the verdict was read, the room seemed to hold its breath. Guilty of manslaughter, Sarah was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The word echoed in her mind like a death knell, a reminder of the life she had shattered. In prison, she found solace in writing, penning letters to Tom that would never reach him. She reflected on her actions, the love she had destroyed, and the man who had once brought her joy. Each letter became a cathartic release, an attempt to make sense of her life. Years later, as Sarah walked out of those prison doors, the world felt different. Maplewood had changed, but so had she. The weight of her past continued to linger, but she was determined to find a way to make amends, even if it meant living in the shadows of her mistakes. The quiet streets of Maplewood held memories of laughter, love, and betrayal. Sarah walked among the whispers of the past, each step a reminder of the choices that had led her here. Tom was gone, but she would carry his memory with her, an eternal echo in her heart. In the end, the tranquil town remained, its beauty untouched by the shadows of her crime. But Sarah knew that in every shadow, there was a flicker of hope, a chance for redemption, even in a life stained by betrayal.